Have you ever heard of the Ottawa Race Riot? I'm not surprised if you haven't. I would actually argue that it is a part of Ottawa's history that is being purposefully hidden from us. We've just passed the 32nd anniversary of the Ottawa Race Riot, and there was of course no fanfare, no memorials, no anniversaries, nothing on the news, nothing in the media. It seems that the powers that be in this country, certainly in this city, would like us to forget the Ottawa Race Riot. But I'm here to remind folks about what happened on that night, May 29th, 1993. I personally remember it, although I wasn't here. I wasn't here in downtown Ottawa. I was living in Manitoulin then. I was a 16-year-old teenager. But I certainly remember it. And today on the Rad Book Club, I'm going to do a reading from Web of Hate by Warren Kinsella, Inside Canada's Far-Right Network. Now, this book actually has an account of what happened that night. And before I read it, and before I talk a little bit about Warren Kinsella, I just want to point out that when you search for the Ottawa Race Riot or any information online, you'll find very little. And although there used to be footage and actually the reporting from the CBC on the CBC archives on their website, I believe the reporter was Terry Malevsky, if I'm not mistaken, one of my heroes, so to speak, in terms of journalists. That footage and that reporting is gone. It's been scrubbed from the CBC archives. And we actually, I think, have to ask ourselves why. It used to be on the CBC archives and now it's gone. And I would really love to know why. There are issues, as you'll see in this book, as in the readings that I'm about to do, that there was implications of involvement by CSIS, certainly by the police, and by other far-right actors who perhaps are being protected by the lack of information and the pulling of content from the CBC archives. I find that really disturbing. But let's push on. Warren Kinsella, if you've never heard of him, is a long-time talking head in the Canadian politics and media sphere. I would call him the liberal Roger Stone of Canadian politics. He is a wheeler dealer, dirty dealer, so to speak. Known for his lack of hesitancy on using dirty tricks, I think, and lots of exaggeration. As you'll read, or as you'll hear as I read this account, Warren Kinsella hates leftists. He is a liberal conservative, and at this point, if you read his columns for the National Pest, also known as the National Post, you'll see that he's also a genocide supporter, a virulent Zionist at this point, which obviously doesn't win him any points among the kind of folks that I travel with. He absolutely hates leftists, and he is very sympathetic towards the police. And even though he's written an entire book about Nazis in Canada, and actually this isn't his only book about Nazis and Canadian Nazis, but you'll see that he throws significant amount of shade on anti-fascists, on folks in anti-racist action and others who he essentially brands as violent thugs. So let's take that for what it is for the moment, and I will get on with the reading of Web of Hate, this excerpt that speaks about the Ottawa Race Riot. From its Toronto base, the Heritage Front then told the press that a Rahoha concert would take place in Ottawa on Saturday, May 29th. It would not, however, say where the concert would be taking place. I want to point out that Rahoha was a band called, short for Racial Holy War, started by George Birdie, and the reading goes on. On the afternoon of the appointed date, Birdie and his band showed up at the Boys and Girls Club and started to unload their equipment off the back of a battered pickup truck. At this point, the RCMP, The Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the Hate Crimes Unit of the Ottawa Police Force all knew with reasonable certainty where the white supremacists would be gathering. Because the event was not strictly illegal, the police did not interfere. Because the event, they did, however, stake out the old brick building that served as the Centertown headquarters of the Boys and Girls Club. At about 7 p.m., 5 blocks southeast, 500 protesters gathered at Minto Park to protest the Heritage Front rally. In attendance were sharp skins, skinheads against racial prejudice, Trotskyites, and the federal New Democrat candidate in the riding. Throughout the day, members of the International Socialists and the Ottawa District Labour Council had been cruising city streets looking for large concentrations of skinheads, police, or both. At about 7:30, the anti-racist activists concluded that something was about to take place in the 3-block-wide area between LeBreton Flats and Nepean Street. By 8 p.m., Wolfgang Droge, George Birdie, and approximately 60 skinheads were safely tucked inside the hall at the Boys and Girls Club, ready to go. The Church of the Creator's black-shirted security legion had set up guard posts around the building. Meanwhile, a club employee who watched the skinheads arrive en masse and feared for his safety, locked himself in a second-floor office and started phoning the club's director of programs, Tim Simboli. By that time, the anti-racist demonstrators had made their way across downtown to the intersection of Bay and Percy Streets, just behind the main entrance to the Boys and Girls Club. The protesters carried banners with slogans such as "Racism is the refuge of the weak and the afraid," and "Save our land, smash the Klan." Many chanted, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, the Heritage Front's got to go." 2 police cruisers were parked end to end across Percy Street to keep the protesters away from the Boys and Girls Club. The dozen police officers present, among them 2 members of the force's bicycle patrol, fanned out along the front of the building, canisters of pepper spray at the ready. One officer stood at the front door with an enormous German shepherd. The crowd by now had grown to well over 600 people. Some of the protesters hurled curses at the police, demanding that they be allowed to confront the members of the Heritage Front and the Church of the Creator. The police, somewhat understandably, did not think this was a very good idea. Suddenly, at 8:25, the crowd surged forward, overwhelming the police. The protesters moved to within 40 feet of the front door, and the tension was palpable. I smile because it's just laughable thinking that the police were overwhelmed. It's silly, frankly. We'll read on and you'll see. Inside, Birdie's band had taken to the stage. They started to hammer away at their instruments, the sound throbbing through the thick brick walls. The skinheads chugged beer and made fascist salutes. Rahowa ripped through their repertoire. Outside, meanwhile, eggs started raining down on the police. A few of the protesters threw rocks, breaking windows above the entrance. Things were getting decidedly out of control. Alicia Rexin, a tiny mother of 2 who had been one of the founders of the Ottawa chapter of Anti-Racist Action, spotted Ottawa Heritage Front member Len Langill through the club's glass doors. "Come on, I'll take you now, you fuckers," screamed Rexin, who had previously called for a non-violent demonstration. Her boyfriend, Ottawa sharp skin Liam McCarthy, joined in, yelling, "Come on, I'll fucking kill you. Real skinheads aren't racists." By 8:45, along with more rocks and eggs, fist-sized cherry bomb firecrackers were being thrown at the feet of the police. The resulting explosions sounded like gunshots. The cherry bombs, one officer grimly noted, were powerful enough to blow off the fingers of anyone who strayed too close. A few protesters also threw bottles and pushed against the officers who were attempting to maintain a semblance of order. I'll stop for a second to say that cherry bombs are nothing compared to the guns that this book talks about the fascists having. The fascists have massive arsenals of guns. In fact, they have a bazooka. This book talks about them having a bazooka. But our side had cherry bombs. So dangerous. Some of the anti-racist protesters had now accomplished what, under any other circumstances, should have been impossible. They were making the Heritage Front members look good. Can you imagine? Warren Kinsella, you should be ashamed of yourself. The Trotskyites, sharp skins, and anti-racist action members were itching for a fight. If the Heritage Front did not appear, the police would do. As if to drive home the point, they chanted, "Cops and Klan go hand in hand." And as I will get to in a minute, he actually proves that point. We'll see in just a moment. We'll prove that point. They chanted, "Cops and Klan go hand in hand." At 9 p.m., after a discussion with the Boys and Girls Club program director, Tim Simboli, police moved inside to tell Drogue and Birdie that their party was over. At 9:15, when it had become clear that a full-scale riot was imminent, 15 uniformed members of the Ottawa Police Department's riot squad appeared from the east. They marched single file to the front of the building, batons drawn. The squad was greeted with a chorus of boos and a barrage of eggs, but the police officers were unmoved. Their presence had the desired effect. Within 10 minutes, the International Socialists had called it a night, and the rest of the crowd started to thin out. At 9:55, even the club-wielding members of the anti-racist action seemed prepared to move on. One of the ARA's Toronto leaders grabbed a megaphone and told her followers that we shut down their fucking rally. The rally, of course, was anything but shut down. But to the ARA, this was a moot point. "Nazis off the street, that's what we want," the woman said. "Unfortunately, we do not have the forces to accomplish this right now. Therefore, we should leave in an orderly fashion and not hand over the victory to the cops and the fascists." The ARA protesters dispersed, some heading west towards Bronson Avenue, others heading east towards Bank Street. At 10:45 p.m. on cue, the riot squad stomped to the Percy Street entrance to the Boys and Girls Club and formed a human wall to protect the fascists. Simultaneously, the 60-odd neo-Nazi skinheads poured out of the building, bellowing white power at the few remaining protesters. The Heritage Front and the Church of the Creator members scrambled down Percy Street, a small group of reporters and photographers in hot pursuit. A few blocks south, on Cooper Street, the skinheads spotted a group of about 50 anti-racist protesters who had been tailing them from Bronson Avenue to the west. Scott Magnish, a reporter from the Ottawa Sun, was jogging down Cooper Street when the two sides converged. The ARA decided to cut them off at the pass, Magnish recalls. They came in at Cooper Street, and as they did this, the Nazis, the Heritage Front supporters, were coming the other way. The two sides see each other, and this roar goes up, and they start charging each other. Beer bottles start flying. Some of the Heritage Front guys had baseball bats and boards. As they reached each other, the ARA guys realized they were outnumbered and started screaming, "We're outnumbered! We're outnumbered!" They turn around and start running the other way, and this hail of beer bottles comes down all over the place, with not a cop in sight. Cooper Street residents could be seen peeking through the blinds of their living room windows, watching the neo-Nazi skinheads swagger towards Bank Street. Some of the skinheads were urinating on lawns. Others were bellowing racist slogans at police. So they were there, apparently. Cooper Street resident Arthur Wilsnicki, sorry about that, an assistant to Shirley Mayhew, then the Liberal Party's human rights critic, stepped out of his front door to see what was happening. "I'm not gonna put up with this crap on my street," he said. At Bank Street, the neo-Nazis, led by Wolfgang Droege and George Birdie, turned and headed north towards Parliament Hill. As cars sped by, the Heritage Front and Church of the Creator members made fascist salutes and yelled white power at those who lingered long enough to stare. Ottawa Front member Nicole Poirier whirled on reporters who were following. "Are you guys on the wrong side of the tracks or what?" she shrieked, her eyes wild with some kind of private madness. Fascist madness? "I'm getting fucked by black people, eh? Yeah, you fucking gay people, fuck off." Charming. At the corner of Cooper and Bank Streets, the neo-Nazis paused while a few of their members urinated on automatic telemachines. Arthur approached one of the skinheads who was wearing a bandana across his face. "You goddamn coward with your mask and your bullying," he said, looking utterly fearless. "Why don't you get the hell out of our city?" Appearing startled, the skinhead, who stood a full head taller than Wilsnicki, sorry about that, backed away. Across the street, another man yelled, "You're all filled with hatred." Unperturbed, the skinheads moved on. Wolfgang Droege, leading at the front, and George Birdie giving impromptu interviews at the rear. Asked where the ad hoc neo-Nazi parade was headed, Birdie laughed. "Beats me." A few minutes later, Wolfgang Droege's destination became obvious: Parliament Hill. As the group marched across Wellington Street, one of the skinheads stopped beside a car waiting at a stoplight. The driver was a black man. Leaning against the car, the masked skinhead pointed and said, "You're next." When the traffic light turned green, the black man sped away, his tires squealing. The skinheads laughed. At about 11:30 p.m., after giving speeches on the Hill, Wolfgang Droege led his troops along the north side of Wellington Street. The anti-racists, meanwhile, kept to the south side, maintaining a respectful distance. Curses were traded back and forth. About 8 police cruisers shadowed the two groups. Some officers warned passers-by, especially non-whites, to move away as quickly as possible. The skinheads gathered by the front doors of the Chateau Laurier Hotel as guests scrambled to get away. Across the street, near the War Memorial, the anti-racists chanted more slogans. A few threw rocks across the street. Then, at precisely 11:40 p.m., an animal roar filled the air, and the skinheads charged towards their detractors, dodging through traffic. "Holy shit," one officer yelled. For the next half hour, anarchy reigned along Elgin Street. In places, blood covered the sidewalk. In a matter of seconds, groups of white supremacist skinheads had descended on the slower-moving leftists. Some used their feet and fists. Some used small billy clubs they had hidden in the folds of their bomber jackets. As tourists and partygoers looked on in horror, the neo-Nazis savagely beat and kicked whoever got in their way. One young boy, perhaps no more than 14 or 15, was standing near the ticket office at the National Arts Center when a group of skinheads approached him. After shoving him, one of the skinheads, a dark-haired front member who had led the march down Bank Street with Wolfgang Droege, kicked the boy in the face. He fell to the ground, bleeding from his mouth and nose. Within 30 seconds, police appeared out of nowhere. In a blur of movement, they tackled and handcuffed the front member, and then they threw him into the back of a paddy wagon. So, they were there, and they could have acted, and they chose not to. A few minutes later, one skinhead approached Alicia Rexin of the Anti-Racist Action, gave a fascist salute, and then assaulted her, breaking her nose. Not a cop in sight. Throughout the downtown core, at least 5 other assaults took place. In one case, Heritage Front members dragged a homeless man by his hair down Slater Street, then kicked him unconscious. Now I'm here in front of the Chateau Laurier right now, and if they ever release that footage that the CBC shot that night, you will see at this spot directly behind me, you would see in that footage a skinhead beating the crap out of a bystander, kicking him in the head and hitting him with a chain link. Absolutely incredible footage, and it's shocking that the CBC has erased it from their archives. Wolfgang Droege, looking very pleased with himself, led the Heritage Front and the Church of the Creator members westward. Their work done, Droege's troops were heading back to their cars, which had been parked on the side streets near the Boys and Girls Club. On the way, Droege paused to speak with two reporters. He was smiling. "I saw people lying in the streets, but I don't know what happened to them," Droege said. "The thing is, we never picked up a rock first. They started throwing rocks at us. We said we weren't going to take the first step. We said to the police, 'Let us go out the front door. We'll take care of the problem ourselves.' We've got 60 or 70 people inside, just about all of them strapping young guys. But the police insisted." As George Birdie looked on, Droege said, "We certainly didn't want it to come to this, but they were asking for it." George Birdie slapped Droege on the back. The two men turned and walked off into the night. Now, this account of the Ottawa Race Riot does go on to talk about the fact that George Birdie and some other fascists were arrested, charged with assault. Obviously, the one who punched the child was charged. But let's face it, the people who suffered the most during the Ottawa Race Riot were the anti-fascists, the anti-racists. The people who showed up to protect their communities, to protect their neighbors and themselves from fascists. And who were the people who showed up to protect the fascists? The Ottawa police. Over and over again during the Ottawa Race Riot, the police were shown to be protecting and working with the fascists. Over and over again, even in this account. And we know that Warren Kinsella is no fan of leftists, no fan of anti-fascists. But even in this account, it's clear that the cops were on the side of the fascists. So we can never be surprised by that. We should never be surprised. Because as the chant goes, as it's absolutely true, the cops and Klan go hand in hand. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to learn more history about the Ottawa Race Riot, I don't know what to tell you. Reach out to the CBC and ask them why they removed the footage from their archives. Check the internet. Look around. All we see is a rise of fascism again. Here we are. History is repeating itself. It's shameful, but we need to resist. Like the anti-racists, the anti-fascists who showed up that day to resist, we need to resist. Now, in our time. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe, and we'll see you again.